faux carnelian tutorial, I made a wedge-shaped piece special for this pendant. So I am taking a sheet on the thinnest setting of silver mixed with graphite pearl, and that is 3 part silver, 1 part graphite pearl. And I am cutting first a slice of circle. I don't know how you can define this, a segment of circle, let's say. That would be as wide as the upper part of the faux stone is wide. And I will be placing it between 2 tiles and between sheets of paper so I can bake it perfectly flat. Now, before I bake that, I am going to do first the other part of the pendant that needs to be baked, pre-baked. So I am taking a 16 gauge silvery wire, and I first cut a piece about 6 inches long, and then I make a bail at the very center of it. I shaped it on the same round cutter that I used to cut that segment of circle with, and then I make sure that the arms are perfectly equal. After which I will make a loop at the end of each of the arms and make sure that they are perfectly straight aligned, so they would not be out of line. They would be perfectly flat. The whole wire will lay perfectly flat. And then I will cut another piece, a strip, this time of the silver on the thickest setting. The bottom part of the strip is cut in a diagonal, and then I place it and mark it so it would be, the loops would be right out of the strip, and the upper part of the strip would be about 1.5 millimeters taller than the stone itself. Then I will make the seam at the side of the stone, so it will not be in the middle. Doesn't matter if it's the front or the back, but I want to make the seam on the side of the stone. And then of course I will place some bacon bond on the strip of clay, because normally, even if the stone is wedge shaped, so that would ensure some kind of stability, it's still better to make sure that the raw clay does adhere perfectly with the baked clay. And then I place my strip, as I said, with the loops coming right under the strip, and the upper part about 1.5 millimeters taller than the edge of the stone. And then I wrap the strip around the stone and the wire. And why I made the wire this way, it's because of the way the top of the Tuareg pendants are made. I did not trust just a piece of thin clay to hold the whole weight of the faux stone, so I decided to do it this way. So after I wrap it, I blend very carefully the 2 ends, and then I will use my faithful paintbrush handle for the blending, and then to bend the upper part over the stone. It doesn't have to be perfectly seamed on the upper part, because it will be covered by the middle. Pay great attention to the ends, so you will not have air between the wires and the clay. And trim whatever is extra and was deformed a little bit during the process of placing the raw clay on the faux stone. And of course, also on the upper part, there might be a little a bit, especially towards the wires, that needs to be trimmed. And make the top as flat as you can, but don't worry, because you'll be able, if that segment of circle doesn't fit perfectly, you'll be able to shave a little bit with your Xacto knife. Just make sure that the front and the back are perfectly flat, and that you trim very exactly the edge, so you will not have any kind of bad lines laying on the faux stone. So see, I'm trimming very nicely the extra clay that seems to climb a little bit on those wires. And then I will make some decorations. I'm just simply using the end of one of my blades that is perfectly flat to make two lines, and I will do that both on the front and the back. The back will not be as ornate as the front, but will still have some decoration. So I'm making first these two parallel lines. Generally, the silver part in the Tuareg jewelry is decorated with lines that are done using plain, they have some very, very fine chisels. So I'm taking my needle tool and unite those lines with other lines, creating thus a geometrical decoration that doesn't really have any kind of symbolic value, the way that the real Tuareg pendants have. And I apologize if the camera goes out of focus from time to time. I've really had a lot of issues with the new recording software, and the company doesn't seem to be that good when it comes to customer service and fixing their problems. So this is practically the last video I'm recording with it. I'm switching to a different software. I am also making some extra line decorations at the sides of the pendant, right near where the wires are inserted. And they are just all plain, simple lines that are very easy to make. That is the beauty of the Tuareg jewelry. It has a very geometric lines, but it's so exquisitely classy. It's like it's coming from a top jewelry designer's creation or from some futuristic movie. It's just gorgeous. So here we are, and I'm ready to bake both the pendant and that segment of circle. Now that I baked it, you see on that area, if the segment of circle doesn't sit straight, you can go ahead and shave a little bit with your Xacto knife. Like, see, mine has a small spot there that seems to be a little out of line, so I will shave it. And then for the next phase, I have the silver sheet on the thinnest setting, and then some cling wrap, my circle cutter, the needle tool, and the Xacto knife. First, I will cut another piece perfectly identical with the piece that I had already baked. And I will do that by first cutting a straight edge and then using the same cutter that I used to cut that piece. After which I will be using the cling wrap over the sheet of clay with a lot of care to not have any kind of wrinkles. And I will be using the smallest cutter in the round cutter set to cut a circle. After which, again with the cling wrap very carefully without wrinkles, I will cut some lines. Now I need 3, but I usually cut more just in case I mess up, because after you cut through the cling wrap you have to go and cut again perfectly, and as you will see, I really did a good thing to cut 4, not just 3, because I messed up one. But because I was forewarned that I might do that, I had all that I needed. So I'm going to keep just the good ones. Now for the next part, I will need a piece because I will have the wire sandwiched between the baked part and the new cut part. But I don't want to have any empty space between those two parts. So I am going to put a little bit of filler in the center there, and then I will cut it with the Xacto knife to be in perfect shape, and then I will cut 2 strips also for the sides, for the outer edges that go from the wires to the edge of that circle segment. After which I can place my other segment of circle, and this one being unbaked clay, I can place it without bake and bond. Of course I placed bake and bond between those pieces and the baked circle segment. Now for the next part, I am going to make some very thin snakes. If you're not comfortable with doing this by hand, and if you have an extruder, you can use your extruder to make sure that you have very thin snakes. And I will use them to make 1 rope from the front, for the front, and 1 rope for the back of the pendant. I will place some bake and bond at the corner between the top part and the part that's on the pendant, and then I place one of those strips I have cut using the cling wrap, and then the rope. That's why I said you don't have to worry about the insertion between the segments of circle and the top of the stone, because that will be covered. And I am doing the same thing for the back of the pendant. After which, remember that small circle I cut it in 2, and then I am trimming very carefully the edge to make sure it's perfect edge, doesn't have any kind of little ragged crumbs. And then I will use the back of my Xacto knife to trace a solar type pattern on it. Let me bring it more into focus. Don't press too hard. You only want to leave a faint impression. You do not want to cut that semicircle. Also, there's another reason why I normally use a much darker, usually a half and half, silver and graphite pearl, or even silver and black when I want to imitate silver, but the Tuareg silver jewelry is actually very white looking. There's not a lot of spots to show antiquing and oxidizing of the silver, so that is the reason why I use this time a much lighter silver background. And then I am placing that half of circle right in the middle of the circle segment. On the back where I will be placing it, of course, I need some bake and bond. And then one of those strips, I will place them around the edge of the strip segment of circle, making sure that it's perfectly following the edge and it doesn't have any kind of displacement You can see I didn't place it perfectly, so I need to go back and do it again. And I do that only for the front. The back will not have that strip. Then I make another snake and I use my smallest wavy blade to imprint texture on it, and I will cut it at the thickness, at the same width, at the thickness of the upper part of the pendant, of the thickness of the circle segment. And of course I will apply some bacon bond on the edge, after which I will place this textured part on both sides of the bail part of the wire. Make sure that you place it right in the middle to cover those two sides. Then I will take two small pieces and after placing the back one, and I make a slightly different pattern on the back, but you can make the exact same one. I was just playing here with geometry. And again, on this one I'm going to put a little bit of bacon bond. You can use liquid Sculpey, of course. And then I will take two small beads, ovalize and flatten them and put them right on the spots where the rope and the strip unite on the sides, and then continue with the textured strip all the way until right before the loop. And then I'm placing a few dots on those oval beads, flattened beads. And I'm pretty much ready to bake again. Now once it's baked, I'm going to use Gilder's paste, silver, to give it the metallic look. And I am using not just my finger but also a paintbrush with a lot of care, especially on the areas that you're not always aware of, and that is the cut that goes on the stone, and all the nooks and crannies and the sides of the strips. You have to be very careful about that. And after applying the Gilder's paste, you always have to leave it for a few hours to make sure that it is hardened and cured, because even if it might seem cured right away, it takes a few hours before you can actually buff it. Sometimes I would even place some min wax on top of it. Now for the stone, because I don't have a buffer, I'm going to use some Renaissance wax. And then you will see how I'm using my Polyfast. I have placed dot of sticky felt. I mean, you can find these at the dollar stores. They are in packages of, I don't know, a dozen for a little bit over $1, and they go perfectly on the Polyfast. So you can use your Polyfast as a buffing machine. So that's what I am using to buff the stone. Of course, it was a little buffed before I started making the pendant, but I am buffing it to the final finish. And then what I'm using, I had laying around the house silver plated chain and a silver plated bail, and that is what I am using for the pendant. Happy claying!